Hello everyone and welcome back to my little discussion on a topic I absolutely despise. Last time, we looked at ERB and concluded that it was actually a good show, even 10 years later. But when most people think of versus debating, they don't think of shows like ERB or Cartoon Beatbox. No. They tend to think of characters in a battle, usually to the death. So in today's episode, we'll be looking at these kinds of shows, with one major exception, because I have a lot to say about that one. So instead, let's start this discussion with a show that can best be described as a dollar store version of said show. Cartoon Fight Club is a show created by the YouTube channel Animation Rewind. They're one of those channels with weirdly inconsistent view counts. Sometimes they breach a good few million views, sometimes they only get a few 100,000, and sometimes they barely break 10,000. In addition to Cartoon Fight Club, they've also done rap battles. Oh, come on, I just got done with this! And weird cartoon edits. Alright. Cartoon Fight Club started in 2015, and since then it's been going, well, I wouldn't say strong, but they definitely exist. Currently there are close to 900 videos, but it's kind of hard getting an exact count since the official playlist is filled with a bunch of random junk unrelated to the show. So, this show has the typical versus debating format, giving some background on the fighter before showing an animated fight scene, and then an analysis on why the winner won. So far, this all sounds pretty typical, but the thing that makes Cartoon Fight Club so interesting is their unique visuals. Most of these fights just use pre-existing sprites, which is fine, you gotta use what you gotta use. But the real issue comes in when they try to make their own assets. You got Elmo as a recolored Mega Man sprite. Freddy Fazbear is an animated JPEG. I don't show videos on this channel because I don't want to get tagged, but I wish I could show you guys this because I mean it when I say he is literally an animated JPEG. In fact, don't believe me? Just go watch the video. It's Freddy Fazbear versus Slenderman. I wish I was joking. And then at one point he turns into a CGI model of an actual bear? He's not even wearing a top hat anymore. I don't even know what that is. Now in later videos they just use the SFM model, but in that same fight, Chuck E. Cheese is just a recolored Freddy Fazbear. You got anime girl Dora the Explorer with purple Godzilla Barney the Dinosaur. Jeff the Killer is a recolored sprite from some anime fighting game. The Spider-Man Battle Royale just features 3 of the exact same sprites, just in different shades. Then you got all the time that they just take a random sprite, recolor it, then paste a JPEG of the character's head on top. They're probably PNGs, but JPEG is a funnier word. As for the fights themselves, yep, they are definitely fights that exist, and they are definitely animated. What I'm saying is the fights are typical sprite fights and have nothing to write home about. Then we've got the matchups they've done, which are just bizarre. But before we get into some of those, some of these aren't actually that bad of an idea. They actually sound quite interesting. In fact, they've actually beaten a certain other show to the punch with some of these fights. Pun not intended. But then there's the opposite side of the spectrum, and probably what they're most infamous for. First of all, you got fights featuring characters that rarely if ever get into serious fights. You got characters from trendy horror games like FNAF, Baldi, or Bendy. You also got fights featuring fan characters, meme characters, fights featuring YouTubers, and so many .exe characters. I'm not even sure if some of these guys existed before this show. In addition, they also like to make these battle royales featuring one team versus another, and admittedly some of these are pretty good matchups, like the Justice League versus the Avengers, every Mario character versus every Sonic character, and Godzilla versus every Transformer. But then you got things like Undertale versus FNAF. Oh geez, I wonder which side will win, the one featuring the animatronics that don't fight versus the monster with powers. This is super suspenseful. Memes versus emojis, and YouTube poop versus MLG. Remember MLG? I try to forget about it every day. And purple. Just one of the sides' theme is that purple. This show's also obsessed with Sans from Undertale. There's over 50 videos featuring him, and he almost always wins. Originally, I was gonna say something here about Sans' power, but I'll save that for another time. Oh yeah, and if you thought that a certain other show had some predictable fights, well, you've already seen what I was about to say there. Now, with all that being said, you're probably expecting me to say that I hate this show. No! You see, I honestly find this show to be so bad, it's honestly enjoyable. It's fun watching these videos, seeing the weird matchups, the bizarre sprites, and just laughing at how absurd the whole thing is. Plus, the show is just kind of charming in a way. It feels like it's just a bunch of friends getting together, goofing around, making stuff that amuses them. And for that, I actually kind of respect them for making something they're clearly passionate about, even if they don't have the fancy budget of other shows. So for that, I say Cartoon Fight Club is an ironically good show, despite its flaws. By the way, I'm not doing a top and bottom 5 for this or any of the other shows here, since I really only like doing that for things I unironically like. And so I did it, then the top of each season would just be whatever the least bad thing is, and that just sounds like a terrible top list. Plus, for Cartoon Fight Club, the show has over 800 episodes. You really expect me to marathon all of them just to go, oh yeah, this one was good, but this one was slightly better? Anyways, the next series we'll be looking at is rather timely. But before we go on, I have another disclaimer to put up. From this point on, I will not be using any screenshots, because I refuse to give the following shows any more views. I do not like watching these shows, and I do not feel like combing through them just for screenshots. So I hope you understand. 1 Minute Melee is a spin-off of the show I keep dancing around. It basically started off as a way for people who enjoy the fights of the main show, but don't care about any of the information. So, in a nutshell, these fights are not researched and pretty much just go in with the barest of knowledge of these characters. And as the title suggests, each fight is only 60 seconds long. Oh yeah, and by the way, you'll notice it doesn't have death in the title. That's because a lot of these fights sometimes don't even have deaths in them. So, yeah. Anyways, after about a year, it ended up moving to a second channel, but the last time it uploaded was in 2019, and since then the channel has made... Actually, I'm not really sure how to describe the videos they make nowadays. As for me personally, the series is fine. I feel like the short time limit is its biggest drawback, since I feel like you can't really make a truly great fight scene in that short amount of time. Since if a fight scene is good, then the 1 minute will only leave you wanting more of that fight, which it just can't deliver because of its own self-restrictions. There's also another big complaint that I have, but since it's shared with the next series, I'll be talking about it a lot more there. 1 Minute Melee is typically fondly remembered. It does have a decent amount of views on most of its videos, and most of them later got recycled into fights featured in the main show, or the spin-off created to replace it. After 1 Minute Melee left, DBX was created to fill its place. In a nutshell, it's pretty much 1 Minute Melee but without a timer. In addition to that, it's pretty much the main show but without any of its rules. Some fights feature team-ups or third parties winning the battle. Things like that. DBX is fascinatingly bad. Like, a lot of the things that make it bad are things that I genuinely wonder how it could have happened. For example, we have the visuals, which are for some reason pretty bad, sometimes even looking worse than Season 1 fights of the main show, which is a problem that is somehow still persisting, and it makes me wonder if these guys are given any sort of budget, or if their entire budget is just whatever was left over from the main battles. And they really have to stretch their dollars. Also, some of these fights are more like punching bag simulators than actual fights. I think YouTuber Nemesis Bloodreich put it best when they described some of these fights as feeling like watching two people playing a fighting game, one of the controllers is unplugged. Since in a lot of these fights, the loser just kinda stands there and takes the abuse, rarely if ever fighting back. Also, some of these battles are ridiculously short and are pretty much over as soon as they begin. And then we have my biggest problem with these two shows. The fact that these fights aren't researched leads to the winner feeling like it's just whoever the creator likes more. Like, this is already a pretty common complaint or criticism of most versus debating show, but here, it's pretty much completely true. Except that in later seasons, DBX switched to a vote-based format. Yay, now it's a popularity contest. That's so much better. Bottom line, you should probably do research if you're starting a versus debating show. Well, that's all for this episode of Mr.G versus debating. Next time, we look at the big... Wait! I forgot a show, didn't I? Death Race is the antithesis to there being no such thing as bad ideas. Basically, the show asks the incredibly niche question of who would win in a race where you're allowed to kill your opponent. So far, there have only been 4 episodes, and as far as I can tell, there's no indication of any more being made. This show was not popular. I spent a lot of time in the Versus community for research, and not once did I ever see Death Race be brought up. And I think the main reason why is because, as I said earlier, this is a very niche question. People ask who would win in a fight and who would win in a race. Can't think of too many people who would ask who would win in a race where you can kill your opponent. I'm pretty sure that with this show, they were trying to appeal to both debaters, but it ended up appealing to pretty much no one. If the characters can just kill each other, then what's the point of being a race? I mean, you don't have to be fast anymore, you just have to be good at killing things on the move. And since this is a race, that means that the fights have to happen a lot quicker, and therefore you don't have the same time to dwell on something made to be a fight. So in the end, this show is a mistake, and I genuinely have to wonder, what were they thinking when they made this? Well, that's all for this part. Join me next time when I finally bite the bullet and talk about the big one. I got a rooster to fry. Pray for me.